Update 6.3 is out now, and we have 6 new weapon refines to discuss. Before we begin, a reminder that in this update, we will now be getting Divine Codes Part 3 throughout the next year. I've already made a guide about the 30 new comment manuals available, and maybe in the future, you can use those comment manuals to build our units with new refines. There are a lot of pretty nice skills available for free-to-play players, although it's going to take a little bit of time. Now, back to this video, we have new refines for Shigure, Garon, Years Gunnthra, Sue, legendary Azura, and Mikoto. We'll discuss each new weapon, and we have a brand new counter to Canto to talk about. Timestamps are available to skip around. First up is Shigure, one of our older Lance Flyer demotes, but a pretty decent option for offensive usage. Shigure got a new weapon called the Azure Lance, and it's a 16-man weapon. If he initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, he gains +5 attack and speed during combat and deals +7 true damage each hit. Very simple offensive weapon. For its refine, if a rally or movement assist skill is used by Shigure or targets him, grant +6 attack and speed to Shigure and that ally for 1 turn, plus you heal both units for 10 HP. At the start of combat, if the foe is more than 75% HP, grant +5 attack and speed in combat. So, Azure Lance is a sort of hybrid offense support weapon. For Shigure himself, he gains +10 attack and speed with +7 damage each hit, and he can give himself +6 attack and speed field buffs. That's a good chunk of offensive stats. Additionally, Shigure can buff and heal allies if a rally or movement assist is used on or by him. This makes Shigure a sort of secondary support, although you could build with more support skills in mind if you want. The buffs and healing have no limit, so if you can use multiple rallies or reposition type skills on Shigure, he can just keep healing himself. That could be interesting for longer fights. For the most part though, very simple weapon that boosts attack and speed. If you want to continue using Shigure as an offensive lancer, then that's totally fine. He has some decent base speed and attack to work with, and you can take all the fun skills like attack and speed catch 4, swift or surge sparrow, or blade session. B skill choice will be tough, but I really like flow guard nowadays, just because so many units can spam instant bonfires if you do not bring guard. The offensive no follow-up effect also lets Shigure attack twice, assuming he outspeeds. The other spicy B skill of late is of course Near Trace for Canto, very powerful and fun, plus Canto would be nice if you want Shigure to buff allies with his refine. As for Dive Bomb or Desperation, technically Azure Lance is better for Dive Bomb. Shigure will heal anytime he or an ally uses rally or movement assist goes on him, so the classic Desperation builds might get messed up. I don't think Dance procs the healing though. If you do use Desperation or Brazen, you need to be wary of using assist skills on Shigure. With that said, maybe you could find some synergy with recoil type skills like Fury or Push 4. Now in terms of support skills, since Shigure gives attack and speed buffs to himself and his ally, you could just run Rally Defense and Res or Defense Res and Link. The Link B skill will fully buff Shigure himself, which would be nice. Interestingly, I feel like Azure Lance's refine may maybe encourage using it with the Snag B skills. Those apply debuffs to the nearest foes within 4 spaces after you use a movement assist, and we are getting attack and defense snag from Spring Luthier, who is a heroic rail unit. They are rare skills, so this might be a chance to experiment. Shigure would buff an ally and himself while debuffing enemies. Other support skills to think about are the new Hold C skills. They are 3 space range skills, so the extra range may maybe work for a full-on support build. You could maybe do something like Fury, attack and defense snag, and a Hold C skill. Maybe wait for a better Hold variant though. To add to this, Flyer mobility skills would let Shigure or his team move around him more. That way you can rally or reposition easier, and then that procs Azure Lance's buffs and healing. Overall, Shigure is in an interesting spot. Obviously, you can still use him as an attack and speed focused flyer, but I do see possible usage with a hybrid journalist support build. The main issue for combat is that Shigure doesn't get any defensive help, which might be an issue. Healing is nice, but if you die in 1 round, it's not gonna help. Not a bad refine for an older Lance Flyer demo. Our next refine is for Garon, a slow Red Infantry Dragon you can buy with heroic grails. There are quite a lot of Red Infantry Dragons who are free to play friendly that are all filled at lower speed but tankier stat spread. Garon, despite not having the craziest attack or base defenses, already had one thing to make him stand out, and that was that Breath of Blight neutralizes dragon effectiveness. This is not a common trait for dragons, but can definitely be a factor if you want to build a red dragon tank. Now, Breath of Blight got some additional upgrades. At start of turns 3 and 4, deal 13 damage to foes within 4 spaces, and restore HP to Garon equal to the number of foes hit times 13. At start of combat, if Garon has more than 25% HP, he gains +5 attack and inflicts -5 attack on the foe during combat. Alrighty, so Breath of Blight has a gimmicky effect, and they buffed pretty much every aspect of it. It now works on turns 3 instead of just 4. It deals 13 damage instead of 10. It has a 4 space range instead of 3, and the healing got bumped up from 5 per enemy hit to 13 per enemy. The +5 attack and -5 attack debuffs are entirely new. To take advantage of his weapon, Garon really wants the fight to begin by turns 3 and 4. Now, further refine, if foe initiates combat or has more than 75% HP, grant another +5 attack, inflict -5 attack on the foe, and inflict guard on them as well. So overall, Garon will normally get +10 attack, inflict -10 attack, and he has guard while not being weak to dragon effective weapons. He definitely needed those extra stat points, and guard is always good for slower tanks. As for the turn 3 and 4 effect, Garon will basically deal out of combat damage and heal the damage he inflicts. If he hits more enemies, he heals more HP. While 13 HP isn't super crazy, if it lands twice, that is a lot more impactful, both in terms of damage and healing. If you use Garon, you really want the fight to develop by turn 2 so he can proc his life leeching ability for the next 2 turns. Overall, not a bad refine. They basically gave him actual combat power on top of making his gimmick stronger. With only 22 speed and no extra help, Garon is pretty much reliant on quick riposte type skills for killing power. His out of combat damage can help, but you have to position correctly and do it by turn 3 and 4. Luckily, with -10 attack debuffs and guard, Garon can be a pretty tanky dude. He no longer has to choose between dual stances and distant counter. He can now run distant counter skills very easily. With steady breath as a seal, Garon can charge up his specials faster, and Dragon's Ire is just the strong quick riposte for dragons. This is a very simplistic build. If you do want to tweak it, you could do something like a one-shot type build. Garon can run Time's Pulse to put Bonfire 2 cooldown. He can now abuse steady breath to instantly retaliate with Bonfire, and you can run Dragon's Wrath for extra damage. Take it further by grabbing Legendary Sheeta's Distant Storm for 5 more attack. Now for other skills, you can of course use regular quick riposte. You can also do the low attack and res plus quick riposte seal combo. Dragon Wall is an option, but Garon gains no additional res, so you have to run res increasing skills. Maybe defense and res ideal 4 or fortress defense and res. Defense and res menace or attack and res menace can help in this endeavor. If you don't run steady breath, then Garon can run any of the bond or form seals for stats. Maybe you could do solo skills as well if you really want to send Garon in alone into the whole enemy team. Last thing I want to mention is Miracle and maybe Shield Pulse plus defensive specials, because Garon needs to get close and has to wait to turn 3 and 4 for his leeching ability. You could stall for time with Miracle. If Garon can take some hits, he can then heal up possibly 13, 26, or 39 HP. It may mess up some teams who can't burst him down. Same idea with defensive specials and Shield Pulse. Now, this may work better with things like Bolt Towers or do a Hector's 20 out of combat damage skill. Maybe Surtur's Refine could massively buff Simhar's range too. You could even run a second Garon, but that's definitely not going to be common. Like a lot of gimmicky Grand Hero battle weapons, Breath of Blight has some hoops to jump through. At least it offers some fine combative power now, and it made the gimmick a bit more useful and practical. Our next refine is for Years Gunnthra, who's a sword flyer with some incredibly scary potential. Her Hikami keeps its old effect of +3 speed and inflicting debuffs on the nearest foe within 4 spaces each turn. It went up from -4 to all stats to -6 though. Additionally, at start of combat, if Gunnthra has more than 25% HP, she inflicts -4 to the foe's attack speed and defense stats during combat. Very simple. For the refined portion, if Gunnthra initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, inflict another -4 to attack speed and defense on the foe, and grant bonus attack equal to the total penalties on the foe. So, Hikami's Refine basically inflicts -8 to attack speed and defense, and applies Gunnthra's Blizzard effect. This takes all the debuffs on the foe and converts it into extra attack. In the case of Hikami, if Gunnthra attacks the closest foe who has those -6 to all stat debuffs, she's going to gain +24 attack. That is on top of the -4 to most stats already on the foe. Like with regular Gunnthra, Years Gunnthra will absolutely slap you if you do not remove debuffs. It is a single tracked game plan though, because if the foe can completely neutralize debuffs, then Hikami just inflicts -8 to attack speed and defense, and that's about it. For example, Ascended Idun basically gets rid of 30 damage from Gunnthra, and the same can be done for any armed unit with Slick Fighter. Debuff neutralization may not always be active, but it is absolutely clutch against units like Gunnthra. In terms of builds, we have already discussed some offensive melee fire skills when we talked about Shigure. In fact, Shigure and Gunnthra aren't too different stat-wise, but while Shigure boosts his attack and speed, Gunnthra is also going to gain some defensive power from her Refine. For the most part though, she wants to take advantage of Hikami debuffing the closest foe. If Gunnthra can smack them, then They will have minus 14 defense, and she gains plus 24 attack from the Blizzard effect. That is going to hurt a ton, and we want to make sure she can double, so Flow Guard again is really good. Offensive no fallout, but all that extra attack is great, and not eating a special is vital as well. Tack on a Rain C skill, and other attack and speed are increasing Sacred Seals, and well, Gunnthra will be quite scary. She won't be super squishy like Shigure with minus 14 attack debuffs, and you could feed into this with skills like Sturdy Impact and attack variants of Rain skills. If you really want, you could do something like Sturdy Impact, Attack and Defense Near Trace, and Attack and Defense Rain, just stacking all the attack debuffs on top of Hikami. For some other skills, since Gunnthra effectively creates a 38 attack advantage against debuffed foes, she could run Heavy Blade. Surge Sparrow would be nice for healing since she has an HP condition, and she's still going to take some damage. If you want solo skills, then that is totally fine as well, and you can mix and match. If you don't need no follow-up, then Dive Bomb and Desperation are great. Again, hitting twice in a row with all that extra attack will be pretty devastating. Last, because Hikami has a 4-space range, odd or even tempers for +1 movement would be fine. Overall, Years Gunnthra very much is like her regular counterpart. If you can put her on a debuffing team, that is great, but generally speaking, since Hikami debuffs the closest foe, which should be in Gunnthra's attack range anyway, she should always have a target in sight. That means that they get the debuffs needed to power their Refine, and Gunnthra's initiation is gonna hurt a ton. On the flip side, if the foe neutralizes debuffs, then Hikami is nothing special. Years Gunnthra is mainly just abusing a lot of stat debuffs and with a massive attack boost. Our next refine is for Sue, who is a Greenbow Cav and is in the 4-star Special Break group. She's been pretty overshadowed by Python and Wrath, who are demoted Greenbow Cavs, and then Shigure kinda sealed the deal by being Heroic Girl option with just more stats in every category. Sue really needs something to stand out from those three for how rare she is, and I do think they did her some justice. Sue has gotten the quick Mulagir, which has 14 might. If Sue initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, grant attack and speed +5 to unit during combat, and also if she has 5 or more speed than the enemy, the foe cannot counterattack. So basically, +5 attack and speed, and if Sue naturally doubles the enemy, she gains a Fire Sweep effect. Very nice effect to have. For the refine portion, at the start of combat, if Sue has more than 25% HP, she gains another +5 attack and speed, and her first attack during combat deals damage equal to 50% of her speed stat. Additionally, if she initiates combat and attacks, she deals 7 damage to the target and foes within 2 spaces of target after combat. Okay, so Quick Mulagir is appropriately named because it is almost exactly like Legendary Lane's Swift Mulagir Refine, plus her Lawless Decay 2A skill. Sue will gain +10 attack and speed, and Fire Sweep if she outspeeds the enemy. Her 15% speed hit is only 1 time, but naturally she will have at least 48 speed, and that is already +7 true damage. If you can hit 60 speed, that's going to go up to +9 damage. After all of this, Sue will then have a Savage Blow / Poison Strike effect and deal 7 splash damage around her target. I have to say these are some pretty good effects for Sue to stack up against her free-to-play competition. Fire Sweep Bow is still not very easy to get, and she can play into the true damage or out-of-combat chip damage tactics for whittling away at super powerful tanks. It may not be anything super new considering these are most of Legendary Lin's skills, but Sue is on a horse and she can abuse some very fun skills with it. Speaking of which, for builds, Sue is pretty much going full offense. She's very much depending on the Fire Sweep effect to keep her safe since her defense and res are not great to start with. Sue can use the usual player phase builds like attack and speed solo with low speed and defense and Blade Session, max attack and speed increases, and getting rid of enemy field boss is always good. You basically just have a strong and speedy Fire Sweep archer. Sue naturally does come with Swift Sprout too, so upgrade to tier 3 if you can. While attack and speed catch is fantastic for Cavaliers, unfortunately it requires full HP enemies, and Quick Mulagir's Savage Blow type effect will not synergize with that. A skill that will be incredible for Sue is of course Fortress for Canto, Fire Sweep Bow, Canto plus AoE splash damage with stacking Savage Blow or Poison Strike sure sounds like a ton of fun. Sue can attack safely, lay down her chip damage, and she can get out with Canto. In fact, if she's gonna deal a decent amount of true damage since her 50% speed one-time hit is also true damage. That's at least +7 damage, then after combat she hits the target with another 7 damage. If you run Poison Strike, that goes up to 10 more damage, and you could double up for the Sacred Seal with a total of 27 damage plus the 15% speed hit. If you go the Poison Strike route, you can make that damage stick by using Fatal Smoke, prevent any healing from missing boost or healers, and Sue can continue to chip down tanks. With that said, I do think having Canto is better, the mobility is just too good. If you use Canto, you can go with Double Savage Blow. That would be 21 AoE splash damage. If you want Fatal Smoke, you're only going to get 14 AoE damage, but preventing any healing. Overall, I'm very impressed with Sue's new quick Mulagir. She's still incredibly not easy to merge, but for those that like Sue a lot, they gave her a way to stand out from the other green bow calves. Of course, Fire Sweep won't save Sue from Ascended Fjorm and her Fire Save Ice Mirror, but I think we can still say she is for sure in a much better unit now. For Refine is going to be for Legendary Azura, and this one has been on everyone's mind since the remix buff started happening. For one, she will be our first dancer to get a Refine. The devs have treated dancers like OG Hector or Reinhardt and skipped over them. Obviously, one reason is that dance is so innately busted that a Refine is not really needed. That said, they could simply add smaller bonuses like field buffs or maybe some in-combat buffs. When you look at the fairy dancers, it's clear they can make strong dancers with extra support, but they kinda have chosen to forget dancer refines like they've done with the non-5-star healers. That brings us to Prayer Wheel. To no surprise, its base effect got no buffs. If Azure dances a target, she spreads their highest field buff to all of their stats. Now for the Refine, at start of turn, grant +6 speed to allies within 2 spaces of Azure for 1 turn. At start of combat, if Azure has more than 25% HP, she gains +5 attack and speed, and Triangle Depth 3. This Refine has a few technicalities some players may have issues with. For one, generally, more attack and speed with Triangle Depth is not bad for a dancer who isn't fighting. If I do need Azura to fight a red unit, she'll get extra damage, and she's going to take less too. Obviously, I don't want her fighting green in the first place. Now, the other half to this conversation is that Dancer AI, or just enemy AI in general, follows a set of rules to determine if they attack or dance an available ally. If the Dancer deals less than 5 damage, then attacking has less priority. The +5 attack and Triangle Depth versus red units might make Azura more susceptible to being baited. However, the opposite is true for green units, where Triangle Depth may make Azura target them less. All I'm going to say is that if you use Azura for a defense team, you can simply not use this Refine, and when you use her yourself, you can manage her manually. The main thing you lose out on is that the Refine is going to give Azura a 2-space speed buff for her team. This is kind of important because normally Azura has to run a buffing skill like Attack Tactic, then she can use Prayer Wheel to spread the buffs. With the Refine, you free up her Sleep slot or Sacred Seal slot. Now you can run something like Guidance or Ground Orders. It's a pretty nice quality of life improvement. Now let's discuss Legend Azura's remix buff to Grey Waves 2. Grant another action to target ally, and if it's an infantry or flying ally, grant no panic and +1 movement to the target. Pretty much no changes, except Azura now gives infantry and flyers no panic on top of the +1 movement. Clearly, no panic is there since Prayer Wheel spreads the buff to all stats. Important to note, Azura does not give no panic to armors or cavaliers. They are excluded from that and will only be affected by Prayer Wheel. In terms of builds, well, if you weren't using Azura for combat, then not much has changed. She did get attack and speed push 4 for free, so if you use that, then she can get +12 attack and speed with the Refined stat boost. That's not too bad, and Azura has some speed to work with if you can get into a red matchup. Making her harder to double may be worthwhile, and generally it isn't a bad strategy for dancers. Another common tactic is just to slap on Wings of Mercy. Letting your dancer warp to any low HP ally on demand is just too strong, and whether it's in the player's hands or the AI. In terms of buffs, well, technically the +6 speed buffs work with Azura's default attack tactic. You can give everyone +6 attack and speed, but you would have to play by the tactic team rules. If you drop attack tactic, you can instead run in-combat buffs like the newish Cross Spurs. This is fine if you only really care about buffing one ally, and then Grey Waves 2 provides no panic as well. No panic may be useful if you have units who need an active bonus, for example, infantry units running ideal 4A skills. If their field buffs get neutralized, they can still proc the effect. Now if you want mobility, then dancers can use Canto. We are getting a free dual Corin who has speed and Reservoir Trace, if that is something you really want for Azure. Technically it would help with combat, and you could even run Azure with a Rain C skill or the new Hold variant. While upping her personal combat isn't a priority, maybe it can work out. Triangle Depth and all the extra damage may let Azure get some kills, and if you have a highly invested one, then that could be a plus for you. If you'd rather just use Azure for dancing, then there are other mobility tools like Aerobatics, which she has by default. With the C slot open for attack tactic, you could run Ground Orders or Air Orders or even Guidance. Sacred Seal versions are available, but maybe you want to run multiple of them. Prayer Wheel has its own way to buff the team now, so it's a fine option. All in all, Legend Azura is still a fantastic unit. Maybe she isn't the absolute #1 dancer in the game now, thanks to the dual harmonic and the mythic fairy dancers, but Dance with bonus movement is still so good. While it may not benefit everyone's defense setups, the prayer will refine is still nice. The buffing part is great if you want to free up a skill slot, but it could also let Azura buff multiple stats. As for our Grey Waves 2, it's a bit boring, but it is a pure upgrade. No Panic is fine, but there is still no way to handle enemy skills that neutralize your field boss. Honestly, I do think they played it really safe with Legend Azura's Refined Remix. Will this open the way now for other Dancer Refines? Who can say, but it's clear they do not want to go the Brave Hector levels of power creep if they do start doling them out. Last up is a relatively simple refine, but something that everyone should be aware of. Mikoto is an infantry healer and another 4-star special raid unit. She got the new Doting Staff, which has 14 might and built-in Dazzling Staff. If she initiates combat, she gains +4 attack and speed during combat. After combat, if she had attacked, inflict the flash status on targeted foes within 2 spaces, which just means they cannot counterattack. Doting Staff is essentially the Flash Plus staff with Swiss Sparrow. If you want Mikoto to do actual damage though, you're going to need Wrathful Staff. Now, for the refine, if foe within 4 spaces of Mikoto triggers Canto, inflicts Canto control on that foe. Oh boy, it has begun. Canto Control is a brand new effect. It limits the number of spaces targets can move with Canto. If it's a melee foe, they can only move 1 space max when Canto triggers. If it's a ranged foe, their action ends immediately when Canto triggers. Yes, Canto Control is finally a way to counter Canto. Only Mikoto's Refine has it currently, but 100% this effect will get thrown on newer units eventually. Right after putting multiple Canto trade skills in the Divine Code shop, they released a counter to this skill. Maybe they were salty that everyone's going to get a free Canto unit from A Hero Rises. I have tested Canto Control a bit myself, and it does exactly what it says. If any foe triggers Canto within 4 spaces, then their turn ends if it's a ranged foe, and for melee units, they can only move 1 space max, even if it's someone with Canto 2 or 3 like Reagan. I might make a separate video reminding everyone about Far Trace with this if you have no remaining movement. Canto does not trigger, so Canto Control won't activate. This will be relevant since everyone's going to get a free dual Korin who can have this interaction. Back to Mikoto, Doting Staff is very much just for Canto Control usage, if we're being honest. She has okay attack and speed if you do want to build offensively, but you're going to need Wrathful Staff to deal full damage. She can use attack and speed push 4 or ideal 4, and if you want to get spicy, then healers can run menace skills. Again, Doting Staff is basically just a Swiss Sparrow weapon, and after combat you apply the flash status. This can help Mikoto's team fall up against dangerous foes, but be careful of Null C Disrupt. Speaking of which, Mikoto gets no defensive help and is not very tanky at all. If you want to use for Canto Control in Aether Raids or Summoner Duels, you 100% have to protect her somehow. If Mikoto dies, Canto Control doesn't activate, so if the enemy snipes her first, they can just run away. 4 spaces is quite large though, so she can sit behind her front line. That would protect her from melee Canto threats unless Gale Force is in play. That then leaves ranged foes, so I would definitely think of bringing a Farslave army unit. If you do not go for a combative build, then you can run or just fill Mikoto up with support skills. Your usual buffing skills are fine, but Mikoto does come with Infantry Rush for AoE Heavy Blade. Maybe you can instead run Infantry Pulse, but if you're going to bring HP skills, you probably want 2 of them. If you run multiple HP skills, then you could also use things like Stall Ploy, Sudden Panic, or even Pulse Tie. I do think Mikoto would be best with one of these types of skills because she really isn't going to be the strongest combative threat at all. If you have lots of investment, then you can have some fun, but otherwise, most players probably just are going to use her for Canto Control. Stick her in the back, try to keep her safe. Definitely watch out for Gale Force teams since Gale Force procs before Canto. Again, this will be very important against dual Korin, which everyone's gonna have. Overall, nice to see some way to mess with Canto. Maybe one day they'll do the same for save skills. That'll be it for this month's refines. To be honest, not the hottest batch, but there are some fun ones like Sue, who I think got a really good upgrade. Canto Control is for sure going to be the talk of the town, but unless you have a crazy decked out Mikoto, she's a squishy healer, so you really need to keep her safe. I'm not entirely sure you start seeing her everywhere since she's not exactly a common unit, but the groundwork has been laid for more counters to Canto. We'll see how this year shapes up though. If you have any thoughts or build ideas for this month's refines, please share with everyone in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I will be back soon to talk about this year's spring banner.